Hello, welcome to Let's Talk Maywood on Diversity Today Media. I am your host, Dr. Reggie Ratliff, and joining me tonight is my co-host, my co-laborer in the vineyard, and expert investment advisor, Terrence Hollinsworth. Terry, are you there?
Yes, sir. How's it
How you doing?
going?
I'm good, man. It was a beautiful day out here in the DMV.
Oh man, it's hard to be sitting around doing these kind of programs.
I know. I'd rather be out there running, riding a bike, or just chilling. But it's good to because we do something that's important for our
I'd
community.
rather be out there running, riding a bike. Yeah, I mean it's the work, and I before I was on this, before I got on here, I had another board meeting that I was on,
Hmm.
and it's just kind of work, and so
Yeah.
um, it is what it is, right?
But likewise, I have my shirt and tie on. People think, oh man, he's dressing for the occasion. I do because that's how my parents raised us. Because you never know who's watching, right? But
Yep.
at the same token, I'm always working towards building better organizations, especially among Black communities. So, I was on several calls today after I stopped teaching to help people with grants, and we're going to talk about that later on in this podcast. But helping them establish their business, those who have their 501c3 or their small business license, help them get a grant that we'll talk about specifically in the state of Illinois. So we're in this safe space where we have
Yeah.
other
So
people.
let's talk a little bit about why we don't have a guest tonight.
Yeah, go ahead. Start us off.
So, we've been pretty heavy in engaging. By the way, congratulations on HBO.
Yes,
I think all of them made it in. Don't quote me on that,
I
but
think they did. The mail-in ballots got it in for Jennifer. So
yeah.
marvelous.
The two things I talk about, right, with community engagement is voter participation
Hmm.
and investments, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And one thing that is absolute is that um, voting matters. So in the other race for trustees, don't quote me. I don't remember what her name was, but she was on the same ticket as Miguel Jones, Trustee Jones.
Hmm.
And the last thing that I saw, it was one vote separating her
Mm.
from losing and tying, two votes away from winning. Right?
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Well, that's why every vote counts. Every
Mm-hmm.
single vote counts, especially in a small town like Maywood. I mean, it's only 24,000 residents and only so many registered voters. And, you know, the voter turnout being 15%, I mean, that's a few thousand votes that did not get a chance to hit the poll,
Yeah.
so it's important. Rachel would have won, perhaps, if more people came out, if that's the final, final polling. So,
Yeah. It's I was concerned about. I said this last week. I was concerned about Brandon Johnson's Chicago race
yeah,
because
yeah,
the Latino community or the Mexican community, they are known for being supporting their own.
hmm,
And when the polling came out, polling numbers were showing Vallis with a slight lead. And
yeah,
so um, when it comes down to it, I'll say this a thousand times over: we can change our communities. We have the votes to do so. We have the money to do so.
hmm,
We need to organize and get behind the vision for where we're going. The world is changing,
yeah.
and if we don't do that, then we will be bypassed by other minority groups.
And I always say this, Terry, it's not a matter of skill, it's a matter of will. Are you
Hmm.
willing to register to vote? Are you willing to go out and vote? Are you willing to participate in the community, regardless of what level? And are you willing to hold the politicians or school board members accountable? Because it comes back to us. We're, community, the residents of Maywood, they're taxpayers, you know,
Hmm.
and to support those who are have a responsibility. You have to hold them to that responsibility. Because if you continue to don't turn out, don't participate, then you are willing to accept whatever may continue to come.
You have no choice, right?
You have no choice. And don't complain on social media about how bad somebody is doing if you are not voting. Why?
Yeah, I mean, here's the truth. If you're a homeowner, out in Iowa, everybody's assessment went up. Everybody's property taxes went up. Uh, I sit on I'm an elected official at the county level, and we were talking about our budget. Do we send some money back? Do we, prioritize some spending things that we really need to take care of? And unfortunately, um, I don't know if spending the money back is the right thing to do, because once it gets back in the county hands, it's not like they're going to say we're going to use that money to lower property taxes and
Right,
look out for the elderly and the poor and things
right.
like that. So,
Well, it's a similar problem as in Maywood. My family, paying property taxes for our home in Maywood, and the amount that we pay is equivalent to almost equivalent to River Forest, Oak Park. And,
hmm
and what do you get in return? You know, it's very unfortunate. It leaves much to be desired. I do have hope as somebody who was raised in Maywood that it can be like it was when I grew up in the 70s and 80s when black families owned black businesses in Maywood, and we had competitive schools, competitive school districts, and we didn't have any handouts. There were no WalMarts. I mean, Sam Walton was still struggling in Arkansas. You know,
hmm
Target's been around for decades, but we didn't rely on Target. We had Zayres, Venture. We had oh my God, we had Hope Pick and Pay. I mean A&P.
so
I
let
can
me ask
go
let
on
me
and
ask you
on.
this: Is do you feel like the closure of WalMarts, right, in city of Chicago, is that good for the city of Chicago? Is it bad for the city of Chicago?
It's a message that I hear people say this is part of disenfranchisement, and it's unfortunate because the economy in those communities where those four WalMarts are closing is going to take a hit. It's also a message that the black community needs to stop relying on retail giants. When you had the Black Wall Street on the south side of Chicago and Bronzeville, and Maywood was holding their own, and then you had Tulsa going back to the early 1920s before their town was attacked, they did not have these big retail outlets. And so you have these convenient, all, banking, cashier checks, get your money orders and clothes and food all in one location. That's convenient, but it is putting all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah. So Seaway Bank was on Fifth and Madison, right?
Sure was. And before that, it was First for Suburban National Bank. And before that, it was First National Bank, right
Okay.
down Fifth Avenue, not off Madison. Off Fifth and Madison was Maywood Proviso, which is right down the street. And then Maywood Proviso was later bought out by the building after they closed, was purchased by PLCCA, Bishop
Yeah.
Porter, the founder. So there were a string of avenues there. And then right on the corner was US Bank, after that. And so, there were banks all around Maywood during those times, and they were fruitful. So I don't think it's a bad thing long term to have these closures, but it's going to take the community, the black community, to reinvest in the community so the money can circulate in the community several times like it did up until the early.
The reason the grocery store closed in Maywood on Fifth and was that Washington.
Yeah, White
The,
Way. Hmm.
yeah, that the property taxes were increased. Um, like 100% in 3 years or something like
Yeah.
that. Um, what does it take to do? Number one, do you feel like Maywood is being fiscally responsible with their budget and things like that?
Well, let's talk about that for a second. Before White Way was years ago, Maywood Market was the one that stayed like open for a minute and a half because of the increased property taxes. But to answer to your question, Terry, I think there needs to be more transparency when it comes to the budget for the village of Maywood. And from my perspective, somebody who grew up in Maywood, and used to a level of excellence among the government, it's much to be desired. And that's the second time I said that. But there are opportunities for Maywood to reinvest in the community, reinvest itself, and have these chart of accounts and line items more established than they are. So you shouldn't have to rely on TIF funds, okay? But because we do, it's because everybody's overtaxed. The seniors don't have services. The youth don't have services. So, and there's really no other revenue generator in the village of Maywood. So, relying on the government, Governor Prisker is good for the money that's coming in, but we can't rely on that all the time. Maywood has to be more assertive with its approach in generating more revenue. So their answer is it needs to improve, it needs to be more transparent, and it needs to be more fiscal responsibility.
So when it comes down to the small business, and we probably shouldn't start here, but we'll go here anyway,
Let's touch
right?
it.
Uh, One of the things that I see is overwhelmingly we have small businesses and people that want to start small businesses in the black community. A lot of them are young, a lot of them are college educated.
Yes.
Um, what do you think? Are we moving in the right direction? Are we not moving in the right direction? Do they get
Anytime,
it?
anytime you have young adults, young people who are starting businesses, that's a good thing because it increases the economic value in the community. So whether it's an urban shop or a small restaurant, those are good things because before that it was what? Desolate property. It was empty, land. Nothing was there. There was nothing there happening. So anytime you start a business, young or old, in this case, young person, that is a good thing. And ultimately, me being an economic professor, Terry, I believe that a community should be built from the inside out. ABCD method. Asset-based community development. And when you have these production of businesses, you're keeping the money in the community and it's circulating. That decreases crime, that decreases the unemployment rate, and that increases the value of that community.
So Maywood does not have a strategic plan. Um, what do you think the components are that should go into a viable strategic plan for the next 10, 20 years?
I think what's important is to have short-term goals to be able to talk about long-term goals. What is the mission? What is the executive summary? Just starting with basics, the introductory part. What is the executive summary? What are the goals? What are the objectives? And then from there, you talk about the challenge. What is the challenge? Well, the challenge is we're overtaxed. Maywood is overtaxed. There's a lack of resources. There's high crime. There are no services for youth. There's no services for seniors. There are no businesses that are sustained in the village of Maywood. So you have to identify those barriers, and then what steps are you taking to increase that? What included with that is the short-term goals. What are the short-term goals? Those are not really addressed. Is it to repair the Fred Hampton Aquatic Center, the Fred Hampton Pool? Is it to continue to build on the Maywood Park District? What are you going to do with those landmarks, like the building on 200 South Fifth Avenue? It's small things. What kind of partnerships are you creating that's going to lead you for the next, 0 to 5 years? And then thereafter, you get into the long-term goals. And then after that, you talk about financial projections and what steps are you going to take over the next, you know, up to the next 10 years in terms of projections. So until you get those in place, those pieces in place, you're going to continue to spin in this circle of high crime, the circle of high unemployment, this high circle of poor, less than competitive schools than the other school districts. And ultimately, you're going to run into the bigger community, you're going to run into the ground in terms of lack of diversity and economic viability.
So your undergrad is in accounting, and your master's, I think, is it in community development or something like that?
It's a community and economic development with a
Okay.
concentration in finance from North Park University. Bachelor's degree from Fair State University in Big Rapids, and a master's at North Park. I also went to Boone State University. Um, to study for a master's certificate in accounting. And then my doctorate was in organizational leadership. It was an EDD, and the concentration was on business and finance. So,
So when we talk about, I really want to hone in on the master's degree stuff, right?
yes, sir.
And the community planning that Maywood needs at the moment.
Yeah,
Um, there are a couple of business districts in Maywood, right? There's St.
yes.
Charles, there's Fifth
Hmm.
Avenue, there's
Yeah,
17th,
yeah.
there's First Avenue, and then we're talking about Maywood only being what 30 minutes from downtown.
If that, if that.
Yeah. So how does Maywood attract the other kind of businesses that will create enough, that'll be there and create the necessary revenue that's outside of the service industry? Is
I
that
think,
possible?
yeah, I think leaders like Miguel Jones, for example, him partnering with River Forest, partnering with Mayor Katrina Thompson, for example, the mayor of Broadview, who was also on our podcast. Working with those entities to establishment with bringing in resources and access and things like that. I think that first and foremost, May would have to offer needs to offer something, and I go back to using the assets within the community, the resources within the community, because we have to be able to offer something to our partners or collaborate within the other towns that's around Maywood, Bellwood, Broadview, Hillside, Westchester, Forest Park, that kind of thing. So we have to establish ourselves internally, and from there let it grow out to create partnerships and collaborations, which is Trustee Jones' long-term vision. And I think once you see that, Maywood will sell itself. You will attract businesses, you'll attract other professionals to who want to live in Maywood. Nobody wants to live in a high crime area with poor schools. If you're certain
Right.
accustomed to a certain standard, nobody's going to do that. Nobody. So
Well,
you have to establish that first.
what about if um, it's clear different, right? You got North Maywood that is
Yeah.
predominantly white.
Right.
Um, I'm not sure where the Latino community is in Maywood, but
Hmm.
they're coming strong. And my question is how do you reconcile all of these three or four business districts to one that again, what becomes the vision of Maywood in terms of attracting businesses that really can bring the tax base down?
We need to talk about getting back to the strategic plan. If you don't have a strategic plan, it's like you have no vision. And where there's no vision, the people will perish. Think about this. I think Trustee Jones said the last strategic plan conversation was back in 2013, a decade ago, somewhere about there. What has happened
Mm-hmm.
in Maywood over the last decade? You still have high drug use. You still have struggling schools. You still have high crime. You still have high unemployment. You still have youth that lack summer programs. There's no pool that's operable in the village of Maywood. We have to go to Forest Park or hope we get some kind of vouchers to go somewhere else. So it may appear bleak, but there's a lot of promise there. But in order for that to happen, Terry, we have to have something to offer. We have to have a strategic plan, a short term, a long term strategic plan. And I'm not even saying using outsiders, us outside consulting firm to do that. Just like an internal audit, you could have internal resources to help establish those. Because people in Maywood are professionals. The average income in
Yeah,
Maywood is in mid 40s. So it's not like it's a poor community. You know, we have everything we need in the village of Maywood to help make these things happen. Those people who live in Maywood, they work downtown.
yeah,
They work in Schaumburg. Okay. They work for colleges and universities. They work in schools. You know, they have the resources, they have the knowledge. It's a matter of tapping into that knowledge and not trying to run the village like you are a yeah, like making unilateral decisions, so to speak.
So you're a pretty successful person. Come out Proviso East. You're not the only one that has come out Proviso East that
Hmm.
that's been successful. Has
Hmm.
anyone ever reached back to you and said, "We see the work that you're doing. We understand you have this experience. Come and sit down and talk with us."
Yeah, yeah. The short answer is no. But I'll tell you this. Um, Um, in all my years of doing consulting work and helping people starting businesses in communities like here in the DMV, I'm very much entrenched on building these communities, Prince William County, for example. Um, you know, I didn't have those same opportunities as often as I did back home in Maywood. Although that was heartbreaking, God gives us a reason to be somewhere for a season. My season in
Mm-hmm.
Maywood came. I came back to the DMV, went back to Maywood in 1997 after Olympic trials to start Eternal Life Community Services. And we did great work for the next 20 years. And I came back to the DMV because that season passed. It was 2 decades, met a lot of wonderful people. But during that time, I did get a chance to work with some great people, Noah Sykes, um, and also Randy McFarland, who is entrenched in Maywood. I hope he runs for mayor one day. Get yourself some residency, Randy, in Maywood, and run for mayor, bro, or type trustee. But I worked with him and Chris Chambliss, who's the son of the former pastor of Miracle Revival Center, Bishop Chamberlain, and to start, Proviso. Um, and it's been a great run working in the village of Maywood, and now out here in the DMV because I was able to cut my teeth in Maywood.
Yeah.
And if you could do well in Maywood, you could do well anywhere. So I have no regrets, and I still keep in touch with those same people. Randy and Proviso 501c3 is doing great work in the village of Maywood and Proviso Township as a whole. But I keep it. Matter of fact, Terry, I take that back. Um, so there's a young lady who I've helped her start a business, Laura Swilly. She's a Proviso East graduate. She started an HR consulting firm. I actually spoke with her just today, and someone in Georgia reached out to me. They have daycare centers in Georgia and in Florida. They need
Mm-hmm.
HR assistance. So, I know HR, it's not my area of expertise, but as a consultant, you find resources. I know Lori has a HR consulting firm. I reached out and said, hey, Lori, there's this opportunity. Are you interested? And she said, absolutely. So we make it that things happen. And same thing, Evelyn Craig. She's somebody else. Now she went to Proviso West. No, but she lives in Maywood. So I knew her mom, her late mom, wonderful woman, former Bellwood trustee. But Evelyn refers people to me all the time to help start businesses, to write a grant proposal, to write a business plan, to help them with their financials. So there are people who I keep in touch with. But
Well, I was really referring to the structure of Maywood, though, right?
mhm,
Because again, being in this space, especially with you being in the DC area, I
yeah,
know Trustee Jones. I seen on his social media that
mhm,
he was recently in DC.
yep,
I was out in DC February,
mhm,
and you know, you go out here and you try to see, there's federal funding and things like
yeah,
this. But
yeah.
how do you go down to um, Maywood or go to DC, ask for federal funding, and you don't have a strategic plan? What are you doing,
That's true.
right?
That's true. Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know, man. I guess they think they're lobbyists, but even with lobbyists, you still need paperwork, right? You still
Well, you
need to
still
have
need to
a plan,
have a vision, right?
right?
You have to have a vision about where you're going,
Yeah,
what's next, because
yeah,
we don't always agree about
right,
how to get there, where to get there. I
right.
I have a really good friend of mine that works in planning and zoning and community development.
Mhm,
They get the block grant money,
right.
and you know, there was a situation where he's doing tours, I'm doing tours of the city. we've got different ideas about exactly which way we're supposed to be going. Because when you
Hmm.
knock down big homes and put smaller homes in their place, and then say these homes fit the neighborhood, what are you doing to the neighborhood? How are you
Right.
creating stagnation in the neighborhood? And that's one
Yeah.
of the things that I fear about Maywood, right?
Yeah.
Maywood has this
Yeah.
great stock of, large homes, right?
Yeah.
With
Yeah.
hardwood floors,
Yeah.
um, wood, what do you call it? Molding and stuff like this.
Yeah. Oh,
And
Maywood had a bunch. It has a bunch of bungalow homes, brick homes, not brick face, brick homes. Yeah, large
mm-hmm,
homes. Well, still have large homes, and it was comparable to River Forest. I mean, River Forest got their planning from Maywood. Maywood was
mm-hmm,
established long before River Forest, so Maywood was the River Forest of the 19th and 20th centuries. So it was basically laid out for us when we migrated to Maywood from the south or the south side or the west side. My family came from the projects on the northwest side to Maywood in the early 1970s. But you had black people there as early as the early 1900s. Like the Sykes family, for example. So they've been there. People have been there for decades, centuries even. Um, but stagnation, that's an economic term, right? There's no
yes,
growth. There's no growth. So it's stagnant. And so if you have stagnation, then it means that eventually what is new becomes old, right?
yep,
You think about the businesses that once existed in Maywood, and I keep going back to my youth growing up because there's a huge discrepancy between what happened in Maywood in the 1970s through the 80s compared to the mid 90s to today. We had a lot going on. It was a lot of movement. And when the Great White Flight took place in Maywood and starting in the 70s, actually as early as the late 60s, and we had our first mayor, Mayor Joe Freelon. He was a principal, a school principal, and he
yep,
became the first mayor of Maywood in 1981. Then you had a succession of black mayors. We had Mayor Don Williams, who was a State Farm agent, you know,
oh,
right
I didn't
there.
know that.
Yeah. So we used me, Randy McFarland, and a couple other guys from Second Baptist Church, because Randy, we were members of Second Baptist Church under the late W. Sykes, Wallace Sykes, and who was also a civil rights leader during his time. But you had Mayor Freelon, you had Don Williams, you had the Yarbroughs, Henderson and Karen Yarbrough. You had a plethora of politicians and powerful leaders in Second Baptist Church alone. Not to mention the late Wade, Pastor Wade from Rock of Ages Baptist Church when it was on 15th and Van Buren, right before Pastor Wiley came in, some years later after Pastor Wade passed away. So we would go to, Mr. Williams' house before he was mayor of Maywood. And we would do Bible study on Tuesday night, and we drink Kool-Aid and eat popcorn. I mean, I remember like it was yesterday, you know. So you had that type of inclusivity and you had that type of progression going on. And my family, he was our agent. And then you can't forget about the late Eugene Moore, who had his insurance practice. And so it just resonated within us to say we could be successful business owners. We just have to keep it going.
Yeah,
But ultimately, then you had Hathaway Insurance. Oh my God, Hathaway Insurance right across the street. Don Williams' wife owned Hathaway Insurance just across the street from State Farm. I know I'm talking to somebody out there. You guys know
yeah,
probably
right.
history. So when Mrs. Williams unfortunately passed, and that led to the insurance business being sold, and then ultimately, um, also Pastor Bishop Reverend Don Williams, because he was a minister as well. He passed away. Then they tore down the building, and then they tore down what used to be a car wash next to um, the restaurant Hillary and Cooks, who was owned by Mr. Hillary. All right. So these are people who own businesses, Terry, and you have auto renewal. You have Flash Car Wash, which is located at the parking lot across the street from Rock of Ages. You had Chat's Corner. You had Robinson right there in Washington and Fifth Avenue. So these businesses were black owned businesses. The
Yeah,
Hispanics back in the day were on the other side of the railroad tracks. They're on Lake Avenue, Lake Street, and leading up to Melrose Park. Because Melrose Park used to be an Italian neighborhood, and then you
Ah, yeah,
yeah, it converted to a Hispanic neighborhood.
yeah.
So a lot
So
was going on.
so we were supposed to get into um this grant that was coming down from the state. There's a couple of grants that been announced over the last couple of days,
Yes.
and I don't even actually remember what the name of the grant was, but it's
Uh,
on the.
yeah, it's back to business grant.
Okay, right.
Hmm.
Let's talk a little bit before we wrap up. And
Okay.
quite honestly, I know that you can help people with grants. So how do they
Yeah.
get a hold of you again?
So if you are interested in my services as far as grant writing or starting your own business, you can contact me at sratliff68 at yahoo.com. And I'll be happy to respond. And again, I said it earlier, most of my business are referrals, and there are people who I work with who I've never met. Like somebody referred me to somebody who I never even met that person. So thank you to everybody who has reached out to me through this email address. You know, I have my own consulting firm, Ratliff Consulting Firm. We legit. I know my stuff. I've been doing this for over 20 years, and I teach it. So I would love to hear from you. It'll be a free consultation session, and I guarantee you, no grant writer will be able to match my fees as far as the low price.
So this is important, really important part of what we're talking about today. The role of grants in the business cycle.
Yes. So with grants, you know, when money roll in at the beginning of the fiscal year, if most grantors, foundations, businesses who have family foundations, MacArthur Foundation, Johnson Foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, just to name one of thousands of grants out there, foundations out there, Chicago Charitable Trust, LISC, LISC. You know, they release funds at the beginning of the year, and when they give you certain deadlines, that's when the money runs out by that time. For example, this grant, Back to Business, it started on April 5th and it runs until May 10th. So there are three different types. It is for restaurant owners, hotel operators, and creative arts. So it's three different criteria that you must meet. And the range of the grants are from five to $50,000. And it's for whatever purpose, for operational use, payroll. And these are businesses who were impacted by COVID. So when you are struggling with COVID, even if you were shut down in 2020, you can still qualify. So these fundings are available basically on a first come, first served basis, a lot of them, unless there's a deadline because it's a certain amount allocated. But the longer you wait to apply for a grant during the year, even though that's ongoing, that has no deadline, the longer you wait, the less your chances are of receiving funds. So
So
it's important to
so
get
is
on
it
top of
so this grant really isn't for startups. It's more of established businesses that are out there.
it. Yes, these are businesses that existed since 2020, I think March of 2020, March 12th of 2020. So you have to have been in business. So if you started your business in 2021, you would not be eligible. So, like I said, it was businesses who were really impacted by COVID. Um,
Okay.
so it could be a for-profit corporation or limited liability corporation. I'm reading right off the website. It could be a partnership, a sole proprietorship that's authorized to conduct business in the state of Illinois, and also you could be a nonprofit operating in Illinois, but registered as a 501c3.
Okay.
So if you need your 501c3, I mean, you're not going to get it by April. You're not going to get it by May, by May 10th. I can assure you that. But I can tell you this is not the only grant that's in existence. There are several other grants out there that is beyond this grant and its deadline. But it's important to get that 501c3 status. And you get that by getting registered with your state, in this case, the state of Illinois, get your articles of incorporation. That's a small nominal fee. And then once you get that, you establish your employer identification number. It's a 9-digit number that you get from the Internal Revenue Service. And then once you establish that and become certified in the state of Illinois, then you can file for your 501c3 status, which means you could be a private organization to receive grants, donations, gifts, things like that. So that takes a little time, maybe a couple months. And once you receive that, you can basically get any type of grant by identified by your EIN.
So I want to option off for a minute. And you and I have had extensive conversations about people that are giving these same services, right?
Yeah.
There is more than an over an abundance of people that are offering services that says, I can help you write grants. I can help you, um, with marketing and things like this.
Right.
Is these things, what is it that people should know about? How do you distinguish one person from somebody else over here? One person that might have 500,000 views or
Right.
followers, right? Is
Right.
that the person that is the
No.
best person to give advice?
No. No. I've seen some people who have 500,000 views and they talk about like investments, which is your area of expertise, and they don't even know what a derivative means. They say something and they just all whack to the left. Like that is not a derivative.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you did not do your homework, nor did you go to school to study finance. First thing you should do, Terry, is check a person's credentials and don't focus on the views. All right. I mean, we should have learned that through all these scam artists. Okay. Bernie Madoff, for
Yeah,
example,
right.
Ponzi scheme, and others out there who will rob people of millions and millions of dollars, who who have a good flow to their rhetoric, who can talk, that stuff, that just make you say, "Oh, I want him or her." Don't go for it. Don't go for it. Go with the person who has credentials and who is recommended. Look at somebody, get recommendations on the person if you need more information. It's your money, it's your investment. You should look at that person and vet them out.
Yeah.
And I have one client. She she runs a successful business, but she's been scammed because we trust people without doing our homework. And it's important that we do our homework. Base your judgment on somebody on their actions, not
Yeah.
their words. The only words that you're based on is when they put together that professional marketing plan or strategic plan or what they wrote on their resume, their bio or whatever. That's where you start. And then references.
Yeah. So this is the one thing I'll say tonight because we're getting long, but I feel sorry for some of these people that feel like that they're going to go out and start a business, and the advice that they're getting is to go and get a 501c3 because they
Mhm.
think that there's this abundance amount of grant money out there.
Right.
Then they write a couple of grants and find out, guess what?
Mm, mm,
Um,
yeah.
the grant money ain't there like they thought it was, right?
Right. Right.
And
Well,
go
yeah.
ahead.
I was going to say you should diversify your portfolio. Just like in investments, you should diversify your dollars, even as a nonprofit organization. You shouldn't be focused all on grants. You should definitely not should try to get loans, but you should focus on ways to generate revenue. There are grants out there. I mean, you and I talked about this. There are grants out there, but you should be knowledgeable of what's going on. Grants are not guaranteed, nor do you have to pay back. There are people who ask me, "Do I have to pay grants back?" Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Let me share this story with you real quick, Terry. I know time is. I just gotta say this. So when Sonia Coleman and myself and Patrick Winters and a few others was running the 200 building um, from 2012 to like 2016, we had a lot of partnerships. We had partnership with Loyola University Medical School, Stitch School of Medicine. We had partners with the school district 209 and 89. We had other businesses that supported us. We also had grants. And so with that, we were able to establish the amount that we had to pay to sustain our place at the 200 building. That building was packed. Both floors was packed. We had over 100 youth coming in every single night, Monday through Friday, playing basketball. We had a youth basketball league with a wrestling program, financial education program, academic program, and we had volunteers and tutors from the community as well as from Loyola and Proviso, and we were humming. But that takes partnerships, that takes perseverance. And so when you have that, then guess what? You have a successful community. There are things that you do for the youth, there are things that are available in terms of services for adults and for seniors. So a lot of this happens when you work together. And that's what the village of Maywood needs. We need to continue to work together so we can become the Maywood that we once was.
Yeah. So I'm going to say this to anybody that's listening. Um, if we're going to close the wealth gap in Maywood and in other predominantly black neighborhoods, we are not going to do it through grant programs, through non.
Mm-mm.
And we need to develop real business plans. We need to think about the viable businesses over the next 10 years, right? And really start making those investments. And with our kids, we need to start
Absolutely.
making investments in our kids so that they understand STEM,
Mm-hmm.
that we are creating software engineers that
Yep.
will create that will solve real problems. And if
Absolutely.
we don't do that, um, artificial intelligence is taking away our ability to get jobs in manufacturing and even in the service industry with chat GDP.
Mm-hmm.
um, it's they are getting really good with the technology. What is
Yeah.
that going to do to us as a community and as black people?
Terry, you don't have a master's degree. You
Nope.
don't have a doctorate degree. You have series of investment as advisor and
Series
everything, right?
7.
Series 7. So you can give financial advice to people who are clients of yours.
Yep.
People, you don't need a college degree to work in the world of finance. Now, is it beneficial? Sure, absolutely. I'm not advocating not to go to school. I mean, I'll be contradicting myself, right?
Right.
Do what I say, not as I do. But the reality is, though, however, getting something that's terminal, whether it's a doctorate or a Series 7 or something that's certified that's going to take you for the rest of your life in a career that is sustainable, that you can run yourself, is the way of America. Free
So
market enterprise.
I do want to say this, and this will be the last thing I'll say. We'll come on, we'll do this again, and
Yeah.
we'll get in a little bit more about my story and about investing and
We
stuff.
need to talk about your story, bro. We need to
Well,
talk
I
about your
mean,
story.
we'll do this
Not tonight, but
yeah, in a couple of weeks or so. But here's the truth. One thing that I've said to people is most of us will be better off if we forego trying to be an entrepreneur and take the money that we have, invest it well,
mhm.
and we're going to be financially independent if we do that,
Why
right?
don't we invest though? Why
Fear.
don't black people invest?
Fear. The
Fear.
biggest thing that we've learned in our classes when we've brought people together that are new investors and even people that have money in the market, fear.
Yep.
Fear that they're going to make a mistake, fear that they're going to lose money, fear that they're going to lose their lifestyle, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And um, there is nothing that has benefited anybody in the space of fear.
Absolutely. You think about how many people you mentioned some people who talk about investments and finance, Terry, who don't have the knowledge of themselves nor the expertise. They get maybe 500
Oh my
likes
God.
of views. But check it out, check it out, check it out. Of the 500, how many of those actually invest?
Good
2%,
question.
1%. They don't invest.
Yeah,
It's just entertainment.
probably less than that
Yeah, it's just
because
entertainment.
what the biggest problem that I struggle with, and just so you guys know, Reggie pushes me a lot to come on and do these classes.
He's gonna do it,
Um,
y'all. You guys need to hear a real investment advisor, a
yeah,
real investor. A real
yeah.
investor.
So
Terry.
I just don't want to do it a lot of times because the truth is that um, I'm not confident in people, right? I'm not confident that they're going to go and they're going to invest and,
Right.
and all these things. And it takes time, it
Mhm.
takes the same amount of time
Yeah.
to prospect somebody to raise $1 million to $1 billion and, or
Yeah.
just relax. And, these are long days, and right. But
So
what I know is this.
yeah.
I know that there are people out there that are selling insurance as investments.
Right.
There are people that are telling people that if you invest in mutual funds, they're safe and you can't lose money. And the realities of it is that the investment experience is much different than that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so those are things that we talk about in classes, and so then I get a soft spot going. I had to learn a lot of what I know by being in the market and trying to figure out, nobody handed me a book
Mhm.
of business. I had to
Right.
grow my business from zero.
Yeah.
And that's a really important thing that goes on. A lot of black investment advisors wash out because the investment area is tough, right?
Yeah.
We don't have a natural market of black professionals that are high income earners that are also invested in the stock market,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so, it is what it is. And so, because of that, I'm willing to show up and, talk with people all the time about investing and saying, this is how professional investment advisors decide what to buy, when to buy,
Hmm.
and, how we navigate the market, right? So, I'll say something about fear.
Yes.
Beginning of the year, Tesla sold off. In the last year, um, Bitcoin sold off,
Mhm.
right? And you didn't hear people talking about digital currency like they were a
Hmm.
year ago, year and a half ago.
Yeah.
And, they were buying Dogecoin and all these
Right.
other things, right?
Right. Right.
Well, if you'd have bought Tesla at the beginning of the year, by February, you were up 100% on it,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Um, Same thing goes with Bitcoin. And so we're in this higher interest rate environment. And when we were first talking about Bitcoin, it was an alternative to gold, right?
Yep.
And then we had this banking crisis where all of a sudden your money's not safe.
Right.
And what did we see happen? Money coming out of banks, but
Yep.
we also seeing the value of Bitcoin go higher because the
Hmm.
demand for Bitcoin all of a sudden showed up
Hmm.
because everybody's money didn't seem so safe inside these banks anymore.
Right, exactly, exactly. Well, I'll just say this because I know we're about to sign off. Terry, you and I connected with Triton College back
Yep.
in early 2000s, and everybody out there who was listening, Terry was hesitant. He did not want to do it, and I was like, "Dude, you're a former wrestler of mine. You got good partly because of me at Triton College. You owe me this one." He said, "I'm gonna do it. I'll do one class." Do you know people? Soon as he got on that campus, the continuing education department, and we went in there that Saturday morning, saw a bunch of white people. That's because they knew who was investing with portfolios. They started testing Terry. That was a big mistake. And not only did he answer the question in detail, he challenged them. And every week he said, "Okay, I'll come. I like this." He came every week for like about a fourth week. He was hooked.
All
He
right,
was,
I was.
he was hooked, hook, line, and sinker. And these guys who had multi-million or more portfolios were asking Terry questions and stuff. And he was answering them. He didn't give them too much, teasers and that kind of stuff. And so it kind of went from there. Before you know it, I'm like, dude, you got it. I mean, you got this. I just started showing up. It was from 12 to 2. I show up like at 1. You good? He's like, I'm good. All right, peace out. Because he just took over. And that's his comfort zone. And that was his level of expertise. He is the expert. He is the person who can answer the questions. So when he does this public financial education class through these podcasts, which will be a date to be determined, you guys need to tune in because the difference between Terry and others out there is a difference between good and inconsistent information.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not to say bad information. I'm gonna say inconsistent because they don't have the training that Terry does.
Well, here's the truth. Investing is a very personal thing, and what works for we talked about this in our last set of classes. Two people owning the same investment, one could be buying more, the other one could be selling, and both of them can be right for
Yep.
different reasons.
Yep.
And so the problem that you have with Main Street investing in on CNBC and some of the investment shows is that,
Bloomberg. Yeah.
yeah, they need to show performance every quarter, every 12 months. They give a stock recommendation. They're going to come back on the show, and the show is going to be like, well, you recommended Microsoft at
Mm-hmm.
280,
Mm-hmm.
and it's either 300 or it's 275,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't want to look bad on television, right?
Right.
So they're giving you a lot of short-term thoughts about the
Mm-hmm.
market, but the vast majority of us are not looking for performance over the next 12 months. We're looking for performance over 5 years. We're
Yeah.
looking for performance over 10 years. So, how do
Mm-hmm.
we identify these things? What do we go after? And again, it ain't insurance.
Right. Right. Terry's the expert in investment and finance. My expertise lies in business and economics, and together we bring the heat, baby. Two African
Yeah,
American
buddy.
brothers, we bring the heat. And I'm not just talking about wrestling, single leg, double leg takedown. I'm talking about knowledge and experience. So we know what we're talking about. When we release that first class um, through this podcast, everybody needs to tune in. You need to spread the word. Um, that because we're going to talk about the real world of finance.
Yeah, come hang out. I mean, at the end of the day, here's the truth. Um, whether someone is trying to understand basic stuff like how do I understand my retirement and things like this, to I want to put a little money to work, and can I make it? Can I make it work? Can I make some money? I'm behind on saving.
Hmm.
What do I do? Well, we get into all these things, and we get into it from a perspective of just sharing the thought processes of professional investing. How are these things built? What chassis are they built on?
Hmm.
And when we're done, you have enough that you can invest. You have enough that when you talk to another financial advisor, um, you know the right questions to ask. And I'm gonna tell you that's probably 98% of the battle.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So, as we tune out this podcast again, look for that back to business grant, Illinois Restaurant Employment and Stabilization Grant Program, B2B. Um, again, it's restaurants, hotels, and creative arts. So, if you have any questions, reach out to me again at sratliff68 at yahoo.com. It's on the screen, and any other grants that's out there. If you need a business plan written or a business you'd like to get started, we need to reestablish Maywood, and that is through establishing businesses
Yeah.
and to keep going, just like our forefathers did years ago. So thank you very much.
See you later.
God bless you. Good night. Be safe.